Hey all, and welcome back to Fuzzy Ducksy Gaming and the third episode of the Tornado Shot SSF playthrough. Now this episode I'm going to be concentrating on yellow map progression and getting to a point where I've completed the majority of bonus objectives for yellow maps. If you want details on earlier progression, I recommend you check out the entire series linked in the playlist in the video description. When we left the last episode, I was just pushing it into yellow maps on a 5-link and some very questionable gear. So let's go through my aims and checklist for mid-tier mapping. Now, the first thing I want to do, where possible, is try and make sure that I'm not sitting in any of my bad campaign gear that I've been too lazy to upgrade. Next, I want to make sure I fill out all of the expedition nodes on the Atlas tree, and we'll cover this in more details later in the video. I want to make sure I get the majority of the yellow map completion objectives done. My goal is 69 Atlas points, so it'll be 67 from map objectives and then 2 from the first Maven encounters. If I feel comfortable to do so, I'll complete Uber Lab, but if I don't feel I'm ready, I'll wait until a little bit later. I'll also check on Uber Lab to see if the layout's easy or if there's lots of dark shrines en route. This can really help boost your character up if you don't quite feel comfortable to do it. I'm also at this point going to complete any very low level logbooks that I might have had drop to boost my currency and reroll tokens. If not already done, I'll reroll my flasks so that I've got good suffixes on them. This is something that ideally you should have done the episode before, but if you're still sitting on flasks with terrible suffixes, you should be swimming in alterations by now so you can start rolling decent flasks. I also want to start targeting a 6-link. This is going to be covered in more detail later on, so don't worry. And then when the Atlas is in a position I'm happy with, I want to be able to quickly farm expeditions in a comfortable map tier. With the Atlas setup that we're going for, you're going to get an expedition encounter in more than 50% of your maps, so it's something you should be able to get through a lot of them in an hour or two's playtime. And then lastly, I want to start thinking about swapping to crit and preparing this gear. We really want to transition to crit before we take on the higher red tier maps and the Pinnacle Bosses. And again, we're going to cover this in a bit more detail later on, but it's something we'll come back to in this video and the next one. We're now going to go over some tips for your mid-game progression. Firstly, don't forget about Kirak. He offers unique maps fairly regularly, which will help with your completion. And remember, every time you do a Kirak mission, it'll reset his inventory. Again, he might sell some unique maps or some maps that you need for completion. Try to stay in a comfortable map tier. There's no point taking double the time to complete maps a few tiers higher if you could complete them faster in the lower tier. Our aim at this stage is to try and transition to crit, and we need gear to do it. There's no point pushing too far too fast. Keep completing lead mechanics in maps, especially Legion, just because of the opportunities to drop stuff like Geomancer Incubators, which is a 6-link. Also, you can start filling out Legion Splinters because the next mechanic we're going to target is going to be Legion, which we'll come on to in a bit. Use Tugen to ensure you've got a good supply of alks and vials ready for when you do want to start pushing red maps. One blocker that often people run into if they try and rush is they run out of vial orbs, so they can't get their map completion on their red maps. I would recommend doing an Abyss to get a Stygian Vise. Normally, I think it's map tier 5 and above. These can lead to Abyssal Depths when you do an Abyss encounter. You just need a Stygian Vise to craft on. We don't need to farm lots of them. Just have one ready because you are going to want to use it at some point. I'd also recommend completing one Cassia mission to unlock Anointing. Doesn't matter what level it is, just do it so that when you want to anoint an amulet, you actually have the ability to do it. If you've not yet completed one Blight encounter in a map, you won't be able to anoint your jewelry. Feel free to run Katarina at a low level. We're going to be turning over a lot of safe houses, and if you want to give it a go at a lower tier, if there's a unit you specifically want, or there's a safe house that you want to raid in the Masters, then go for it. So we're going to move on now to tips for farming a 6-link, and there's a few different things you can do to try and get one. One option is you can get 6-links dropped from rare monsters. It is quite rare, but with the way conversion mechanics work, if you get maximum links and maximum sockets on items, the monster will spit out a load of 6-links. That's why I recommend doing Legion and stuff like that in maps, because they have more chance to have more rare mods on enemies, which means you've got more chance of getting those conversion mechanics. Again, from Legion, you can get Geomancer Incubators. When we come onto my character, you see that I've had one drop, and I have it equipped, and in about 20,000 kills, I'm going to drop a 6-link. It is RNG to what type of 6-link it drops. It's going to be a body armor, but obviously if it drops pure strength or pure intelligence, I'm not going to be able to use it, but it is a good way to get an uncorrupted 6-link. Ritual is an option because it does offer 6 links, not regularly, but it can offer them. But it's not a mechanic I enjoy, and really you need to be using the Atlas points to get more out of your rituals, and it's just not something I want to do in SSF. You can put your sacrifice fragments into the map device. These have good chances of dropping corrupted 6 links. However, I'm not sure if these have been nerfed over the last few leagues, because I tried this last league and I must have run 30 to 40 side areas and didn't get one 6 link. In leagues previous, I seem to remember running 10 to 15 and getting 2 to 3 6 links. Maybe I was lucky before, but it feels like the drop rate of these has been lowered quite a bit. But it is an option. If you're sitting on loads of sacrifice fragments, you may as well use them. Tainted Fusings are good now that they've actually been put back to their proper use, where it's 50-50 whether it's 6 links. These are a good option to get a 6 link. Because of this, I recommend any 6 sockets that are a decent base, keep them. You can use Tainted Fusings on these. What you would do is you would get the item to how you would want it in terms of the mods on the item. You'd then 5-link the chest on the bench. Then you'd corrupt it and hope it doesn't brick. And then you can use your Tainted Fusing to try and push that to a 6 link. There are other options as well in Bestiary where you can corrupt an item to 30%, which guarantees it stays as it is. But that's quite a powerful craft, so it's not something I'd waste early on. ROG also can link an item. It's rare, but there are mods that will link the item in ROG. I don't think I've ever seen it, but I have seen other people get it. There are also ones where he adds X amount of sockets to an item or links X amount of fusings and stops at the maximum that it rolls. Obviously, you're not necessarily likely to get a 6 link, but it's an option. Bestiary is also possible to get 6 links, but it is normally a 6 link item. So this could be a bow, it could be a mace, it could be an axe, it could be a body armor. But keep checking back Bestiary every now and again if you've killed a few red beasts to see if you've got an option to get a 6 link. Farm faster and not harder is the next thing I want to talk about. I've sort of briefly touched on it earlier, but farming lower tier maps quicker is much better in this kind of playthrough because we know we can't push the harder content and it will get our character leveled up. So there's no point pushing too far and then just hitting a wall and being really frustrated. You may as well stay in lower tiers, get your character at a higher level and get your gear that way. Quick maps means more expeditions. The more expeditions you're turning over, the more rod crafting you're going to get, the more Tujan currency you're going to get. Overall, you will just progress quicker if you're completing the maps quicker. Now, most lead mechanics are still really good in yellow maps. I've tested Legion and Expedition, and they're both really, really good in yellow maps if you can handle the content. So there's no point struggling in lower tier red maps if you could be enjoying and handling the content and completing it quicker in yellow maps. And constantly dying, it does feel bad. I know it doesn't necessarily matter in softcore, but it's no fun going into a map knowing that you're probably going to take a death or two. And we do need to transition to crit realistically to comfortably handle T14 maps. So like I said, there is no rush to get there. You want to get your gear ready first, and then you can breeze through the map tiers if need be. There is no point pushing to get to those T14 maps if you're not able to actually complete them. And then the last thing to go over before we go on to my character and a map showcase is just where you want to go with your Atlas tree at this stage of the game. So what we're going to do is just take these map nodes first. Then we're going to take quite a long pathing along the top and we're going to go to the rest of the expedition nodes. The reason we're doing this is because I want to add Legion in next, and pathing this way takes us past every single Legion node. So it's slightly inefficient in terms of getting to the expedition nodes, but we are then going to be able to go to every Legion node as we fill out the tier 11s and the tier 12s. And then lastly, I'm just taking Stream of Consciousness just to make Expedition turn up more in maps. With all of these nodes selected, you're going to get them in more than 50% of your maps. So I'm not going to do a map showcase for this episode. I've done a couple of hours live streaming on Twitch, so I'm going to link the VOD just in case you're interested in having a look at how the build performs at this stage. I do some yellow tier maps and I also do some corrupted 8 mod tier 12 maps for completion, so you can see how the build performs at that stage. What we'll do is go through the gear, we'll go through my character level, and then we'll go through my stash and just talk about a few general things to cover off, along with some lucky drops I've had along the way that in Trade League would have been awesome. So in terms of the gear, not much has changed. I have managed to add ailments to my chest. I did an early Katarina, and then I had an Iceling in there, and I just used it on my chest because I had 2 prefixes that I weren't that bothered about. I just used it in the hope of getting lucky, and if it bricked, I would just recraft my chest. It didn't. It removed one of the bad prefixes and it offered me ailment avoidance. So because of that, I've actually gone down here and taken these nodes because it makes me chill and shock immune. And if I wanted to, I could become ignite immune as well. As you can see, the tree is very, very sparse now. We really do need to transition to crit as soon as possible because the tree is a bit of a mess when you're not crit. I've got plenty of regrets ready to respec when I get to crit, but I'm not quite there. So the bow is the same. We're still running Devotos. Quiver is the same. Got a slightly different amulet, but it's not really any better until we transition to crit. I'm pretty sure both the rings are exactly the same. The gloves are the same. We've added a Stygian vise that isn't very good, but it's big life. Slotted in a jewel that gives a bit of damage and life. And we have managed to upgrade the boots. They're still not amazing, but they're much better than the boots that I was running. So as you can see, the character is still not exactly brilliant, but it's coping really well with tier 8, 9 to 10 maps. When I get to the tier 11, 12 and 13 and I'm corrupting them, it is a bit of a struggle, but they are doable. So like I said, you need to make a decision as to whether you want to farm really comfortably in yellow maps or whether you want to push your red maps even more and then maybe fit Legion in as well and then drop back to yellow maps and farm, which I think is the decision that I've made. So far, from being on stream, I've completed up to 85 completion now, and the red maps are a bit of a struggle. But as you can see, I've managed to pick up these Legion nodes here. We've picked up these ones here. We've picked up Chance for Legion here. And then I'm going to fill out these nodes here. And then get these ones, hopefully, and then drop back to yellow tiers and farm. So I'm doing it for two reasons. One, the more Legion we get in, the more chance of getting, 6-link currencies, Geomancer incubators, and Legion stones. And then even if I have to run a really horrible 4-way where I'm not getting a particular amount of loot, I've still got a good chance of getting either a Lethal Pride or a Brutal Restraint if I put the right Legion emblems in. So we'll have a quick look at the stash tab. And because of Expedition, we're sitting on a really healthy amount of currency. Got a nice amount of Fusions and Jewelers, plenty of Varlorbs for the red tier maps, over 100 Chaos, nearly 100 Alchemies, we've got Regrets, tons of Scours. Expedition has just paid off big time along with doing Sanctum, and it's really, really helped me just not worry about mapping currency whatsoever. We've got a few exotic currencies that we're starting to gather, so if we ever get gear that I'm happy with, we can start trying to get implicits on them. I have just completed the Polaric Invitation. It wasn't particularly comfy, but it was deathless. It took a little while. The reason it's not part of the showcase is that I had my noise gate way too high on my microphone, and my voice kept cutting in and out. But I have the Eater one to do as well. We'll get that done. That gives me another Atlas point towards Legion. And then I really want to just do the bare minimum of red maps I have to be able to unlock the rest of the Legion nodes. So in terms of Expedition, we have a logbook here that's double Gwenin, so it's not much good to me. I've got one here that I can do Rog or Tujan, and another one that's Rog or Tujan. I am level 79 is going to be tough with my character at the moment, though, so I'm going to save those up until my character's a bit more equipped to do them. I've got a decent amount of exotic coins, but we're running quite low on the currency. Same with Rog, not a huge amount of currency and no rerolls because I've been using them trying to get gear. Danig, we've got some rerolls, but not really a huge amount of currency. So grinding Expedition is definitely going to help me increase that and hopefully craft some good gear to switch to crit. So the character's now level 90 and I'm not bothered about getting it any higher than that. I need to accept some deaths going forward if I'm starting to push content. Even if I'm just doing Legion in like mid-tier yellow maps, some of the generals can be really, really deadly. So I'm not that bothered if I don't level up past tier 90s. Ample enough points to get a decent crit tree going when we get gear. I've only got one item ready for crit so far, but realistically all I want is a bow and a quiver. The new amulet has got crit multi on it, which is nice. The quiver we've got has an open suffix and an open prefix. And it's pretty good lightning damage, some damage of bows, decent attack speed, and big crit multi. So this is ample good enough, this quiver, to stick on for when we transition to crit. I just need the bow to go along with it. I did have a Geomancer's incubator, which dropped me, unfortunately, an astral plate. So even with the Lethal Pride, I don't think I'm going to get 180 strength. I'm obviously going to keep it. It might be if we manage to flukily get an omniscience, this chest can then come into play. But at the moment, it's not really usable, so I'm back to the drawing board and farming all the tips I mentioned earlier to try and get a 6-link. However, do feel free to push to Pinnacle Bosses if you want to get a couple of voidstones. And there's quite a few reasons to do this, but also it is going to be a pretty unpleasant experience. The maps are not easy, the Pinnacle Bosses aren't easy either, so I'll go through my experience when I pushed on a 5-link tornado shot. So the reason I've done it, firstly, is the natural T6 to T9 maps are terrible. When you get 2 voidstones in, you can then favourite things like Crimson Temple, Strand, alleyways. There's some really nice layouts that you can target. So if you don't mind dying and slow mapping, you can push to the first 2 Pinnacle Bosses on a 5-link. Now expect to brick a few maps along the way. If you get stuff like Consecrated Ground and Extra Life and Resistances, the bosses can be really, really difficult. I failed 2 maps where I just couldn't get through the mods on bosses because I didn't have the DPS to beat all the Extra Life and the Consecrated Ground that the enemies kept going on. Expect 5 to 6 minute Eater and Exarch maps. I think on the Exarch fight I had 4 ball phases, and on the Uber fight I had 4 to 5 of their phases as well. It wasn't particularly fun. I think I died 3 times on Exarch and it was deathless on Eater. And I say it's 5 to 6 minutes. We'll run through some of the footage in a bit just to see if that's something you want to do. However, I do think looking back, it's probably worth it for the 2 voidstones. You also get 3 favourite slots for doing a T16 map and Eater and Exarch. If you get lucky and drop like a Guardian map or a Conqueror map, you could run that, just run it white, get another favourite slot. Then you can go to farming yellow maps and actually farm maps that are a decent layout. I say the main reason I did this is because the yellow maps that you end up dropping are just awful. Doesn't feel good to complete them. Legion feels terrible within those maps. So that's why I decided to push through the pain and get the first 2 voidstones. So I'm just going to go through a few changes I made because I decided I wanted to target the Pinnacle Bosses. I just want to explain how I did it. There'll be footage in the background of how horrible the maps were and how ridiculously bad the DPS was. But I was willing to 6 portal both encounters to get my 2 voidstones and to get 3 favourite slots. So there's a few changes that I made. I added point blank into the build, mainly because for single target, it's actually a damage increase as long as you can stand on top of the boss. You also get more shotgunning if you're nice and close to the boss. So it doesn't help particularly in the mapping situation, but for bossing, all we want is more damage. We're going to die, we know we are, we just want to kill the bosses as quickly as we can, which isn't very quick. But point blank just gives you a good damage boost if you can stand on top of the boss. And for things like Exarch and Eater, for the majority of the time, it's easier to stand nearby them anyway. Otherwise, they start doing different mechanics at a range that they don't do if you stay close by. The other thing I did, which will really be dependent on the gear that you have, is I pathed over here to get this increased lightning damage with attack skills, lightning pen, and lucky lightning damage. Now, the main reason being is I have more lightning damage, way more lightning damage than cold and fire damage. So it makes sense to do it. Essentially, the lucky rolls your lightning damage twice. So if you don't have lightning damage in abundance, don't do it. I just did it because on POB it was about 6.5% or something per point in DPS. And I basically wanted to get as much DPS as possible to try and get the fight done. I'm not planning to stay in T14 maps. They felt absolutely miserable on a 5-link. They were not fun at all. I didn't even full clear them. My map supply is not terrible to the point where I could afford to spare a couple of maps. So all I did was, if I needed to corrupt them, I did, and I just ran whatever it was. Didn't care if I died. If it was 15s and 16s and I'd already got completion, then I was just running them like magic with a couple of decent mods on them just to make the experience a bit better. But overall, it's going to feel horrible. It is going to feel dreadful to do it, but it is doable. I think I've got like ridiculously bad sheet DPS. As you can see from all the footage, I hardly move his health bar. But they're fights that aren't particularly difficult other than the involved phases. So even if you can't do ball phases, as long as you can kill him within 6, you're fine. Just take a death at every ball phase. And the good thing is if you do die, you only need to complete 1 more T16 map and you get another invitation. So even though I know I've harped on about staying a tier that's comfortable, the reason I've decided to do it is because of how rubbish the natural T7, 8 and 9 maps are. So it's up to you whether you do it. Feel free to stay in the lower content, build your character up, get your 6-link, transition to crit, and then go and take on the Pinnacle Bosses. But if you do decide to brute force your way through, it is possible. So we'll just cover off my Atlas tree because it's changed slightly from the earlier bit of the video. I've essentially just taken more Legion nodes, taken these map nodes back, so I had to drop them earlier along with the Kirat node. And at the moment, that's the tree. And as you can see from completion, with pushing through to get the Pinnacle Bosses done, we've now got 97 of our 115 Atlas objectives done, which is pretty nice. And we have, some Atlas points from the Pinnacle Bosses and the mini bosses as well. So that's it for this video. The next video is going to be, like I said, I'm not pushing tier 14 maps. The next video is going to be farming Legion as fast as I can. in T7 and Tier 8 maps along with Expedition to try and transition to crit and get a 6 link. I'm going to be dropping a lot of Legion emblems, so I don't even care throwing 4 of them in to do a 4-way, even if I only get through 4 or 5 rounds of enemies. I'm going to be turning over so many Legion emblems, I'm not going to know what to do with them, so if I brick a few, it doesn't really matter. So yeah, the next episode is going to be tons of Expedition farming, tons of Legion farming, hopefully leveling up to 92, 93, and then getting the character in a position where I can actually start tackling red maps and then think about how I want to gear for things like Uber Elder and Maven. That's it for this video. I hope it's helpful. Thank you very much for watching. Take care and see you in the next one.